Picture this. It's the 18th century, a time when elegance was practically a language all its own. Streets bustle with powdered wigs bobbing atop heads, from the grandest palace halls to the cobblestone squares. These wigs weren't just about keeping warm or hiding bad hair days. They were statements, almost theatrical in their flair and meaning. Imagine gentlemen strolling by, their heads crowned with thick, swirling clouds of white curls, some so enormous they seem to have a life of their own. The air is thick with the scent of powder, lavender, sometimes even orange blossom, mixed with the faint aroma of the pomade used to style these elaborate creations. But why exactly did men deck themselves out in these elaborate, often heavy headpieces? Was it simply a fad, a matter of vanity, or something deeper ingrained in the culture of the time? To understand this curious fashion, we have to take a gentle step back and appreciate the whirlwind of social, practical, and even political currents that swept through Europe, especially France and England, during this period. The answer lies somewhere between the desire to impress, the need to conform, and quite a few practical problems disguised beneath those powdered curls. Long before wigs became the ultimate fashion accessory, men's hairstyles were far simpler, or at least less conspicuous. But as the 17th century gave way to the 18th, changes in society and style began to ripple through the courts. The idea of personal appearance as a symbol of social standing grew ever more important. Wigs started as a way to mimic the luxurious locks of royalty and the elite, but soon they cascaded into an art form, with towering curls and intricate rolls that seemed to defy gravity, and at times common sense. Imagine the court of Louis XIV of France, known as the Sun King, who was a true pioneer of this trend. His own luxuriant wig became a royal signature, and courtiers rushed to emulate his style. Wearing a wig was like wearing a badge of honor, an announcement of one's place in the delicate hierarchy of the time. The bigger, whiter, and more flamboyant the wig, the higher the status. It was a visual cue that said, "I belong here. I have wealth, influence, and taste." But it wasn't just about looking fancy. Beneath the curls and powder, there were practical quirks to this wig obsession. Hygiene in the 18th century was, well, quite different from what we're used to today. Bathing was less frequent, and head lice were a common nuisance. Shaving the natural hair was sometimes a solution, but it left men with bald patches that wigs could cleverly conceal. Plus, those wigs themselves could be cleaned and powdered far more easily than natural hair. So, while it may seem extravagant, the wig was also a clever workaround for some less glamorous realities. Of course, these wigs required care and effort. They were often made from horsehair, human hair, or goat hair, and styled with pomade, a mixture of animal fat and fragrant tea spices or flowers, and then dusted with white powder made from starch or lead. Yes, lead, something that might make us shudder today, but back then, the sparkling white finish was worth the risk. And for those who could afford it, visiting the barber wig-maker became a regular ritual, as wigs needed to be maintained, restyled, and powdered frequently. As we peek closer, we'll see that these headpieces were not just fashion statements or practical tools, but also reflections of culture, power, and identity. They were woven into the very fabric of 18th century life, from the glittering courts to the bustling streets. So when you next see a painting of a powdered wig, or catch a glimpse of a judge's traditional court attire, remember the fascinating journey that brought these curls from the world of fashion into the annals of history. Let's step deeper into the story and discover how exactly wigs turned into those unmistakable symbols of style and sophistication, transforming ordinary men into walking masterpieces of fashion and flair. Dive into the wild world of 18th century wigs. Subscribe and uncover the secrets behind the curls with Sleepy History Legends. Picture yourself stepping into the 18th century, a time when the air was thick with the scent of freshly ground spices and the muffled chatter of bustling marketplaces mingled with the rustle of silk gowns and the clack of polished boots on cobblestone streets. The world looked a bit different back then, not just in architecture and manners, but in something as simple, yet striking, as the headgear perched atop a gentleman's crown. Imagine rows of men sporting elaborate wigs, their curls powdered a ghostly white or soft pastel tones, curling and cascading with an almost theatrical flair. They weren't just hairstyles. These were statements, little sculptures of human hair that seemed to declare, "Here stands a man of taste, influence, and perhaps a dash of whimsy." This peculiar fashion might seem odd or even extravagant to our modern eyes, but in that age of powdered wigs, elegance was everything. The wig wasn't just about looking good, it was about embodying an ideal of refinement and civility. The 18th century was a period bursting with social rituals and codes, where appearances could open doors as surely as a handshake or a well-delivered compliment. Wigs, with their towering curls and meticulous powdering, were the crowning glory of a man's ensemble, carefully crafted to express who he was or who he aspired to be. Now, the origins of this curious trend stretch back further than you might expect, blending practicality with a flair for the dramatic. The story begins in the 17th century with King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, whose own love for magnificent hairpieces sparked a continent-wide fascination. But by the 1700s, wigs had evolved beyond royal fancy into an essential garment for the elite and aspiring alike. Each curl, coil, and puff was a note in the symphony of status and style, a way to stand out in a society that valued outward signs of power and sophistication. But what exactly made these wigs so special? Beyond their sheer visual impact, they were often lavishly decorated, sometimes even scented to mask less pleasant odors. Powder, made from finely ground starch, was applied generously, not just for color, but also to give that distinctive matte finish that became a hallmark of the era. This powder often carried subtle fragrances, lavender and orange blossom among them, to add an extra layer of sensory delight. So a man's wig was not just a fashion statement, but a carefully crafted sensory experience, a personal brand before the term was even coined. As we drift deeper into this world of powdered curls, it's fascinating to realize how wigs became intertwined with the very identity of 18th century manhood. Wearing a wig wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a social signal, one that could elevate a commoner into the realm of gentleman or affirm a noble's place on the social ladder. The style, size, and even the color of the wig could speak volumes about the wearer's rank, occupation, and personality. This wasn't merely about vanity or pomp, though. The wig also reflected the broader cultural values of the time, values that prized order, control, and a certain theatricality in daily life. Just as the powdered wig could transform a man's appearance, so too did it transform his role in society, allowing him to step literally into a character molded by fashion, etiquette, and expectation. And yet, beneath all this elegance and ceremony lay practical concerns that often go overlooked. The wig was, in many ways, a clever solution to some rather less glamorous realities, a fact we'll explore more as we unravel the layers of this fascinating trend. But for now, imagine the scene. Salons buzzing with gossip, candlelight flickering on brightly powdered curls, and men adjusting their wigs with the same meticulous care as their tailored coats. It was a world where hair was not just hair, but a canvas for expression, a badge of honor, and a shield against the less pleasant truths of everyday life. So next time you picture an 18th century gentleman, remember that his wig was far more than a mere accessory. It was a social compass, a symbol of sophistication, and a touch of theatrical magic all rolled into one. And as we continue this journey, we'll uncover how these powdered masterpieces moved beyond simple fashion to become powerful markers of status and identity, weaving their own unique story into the rich tapestry of history. As the 18th century dawned, the humble wig began its slow but steady transformation from practical necessity to dazzling statement piece. Imagine the streets of Paris or London back then, men not only sporting wigs but elevating them into elaborate crowns of curls and powder, each one a carefully crafted declaration of style. What started as a way to cover up thinning hair or battle the relentless lice infestations soon spiraled into a whirlwind of fashion, with wigs becoming the centerpiece of a gentleman's ensemble. The trend was far from subtle. Wigs came in all shapes and sizes, some cascading in thick, flowing locks that tumbled over the shoulders, others curled tightly into intricate patterns that framed the face like a silver halo. Powdered white or off-white, these wigs were not just about hair but about drama, flair, and presence. The powder, usually made from starch and scented with lavender or orange, gave the wigs their iconic pale glow. making them stand out in candlelit rooms and bustling courts alike. A gentleman's wig was as conspicuous as a badge, shouting to the world, "I am fashionable, I am refined, I am someone to be noticed." The fashion didn't just trickle down from aristocrats. It swept through every layer of society, eager to emulate the elite. Tailors, merchants, even artists, all keen to signal their upward mobility, began investing in these elaborate coiffures. It was like walking art, a wearable sculpture that announced one's taste and social aspirations before a single word was spoken. And with this came an entire cottage industry. Wig makers became artisans, their skills in high demand as they shaped, curled, and powdered each wig with painstaking precision. Some wigs were so extravagant they required assistants just to help don them properly. Interestingly, the wig's rise in style was influenced by some unexpected sources. King Louis XIV of France, known as the Sun King, played a pivotal role. He famously sported a wig to cover his prematurely bald head, and, with the royal court as the ultimate trendsetter, wigs quickly became synonymous with power and elegance. His influence rippled throughout Europe, embedding wigs into the fabric of high society. The elaborate hairstyles at Versailles were legendary, setting a standard that courtiers felt compelled to match or outdo. But it wasn't just about copying royalty. Wigs allowed men to experiment with their identity in a way that was both playful and highly visible. The size and style of a wig could suggest personality traits or professional roles. Judges, military officers, and clergy each had their own distinctive looks. Fashion magazines and pamphlets of the time often featured guides on how to wear and care for wigs, turning the practice into a form of personal branding. Men would even dye their wigs in subtle shades of gray or brown to complement their complexion or to stand out amid the sea of powdered white. This flair for the dramatic extended beyond the wig itself. The entire appearance, the powdered wig, the embroidered waistcoat, the silk breeches, and the polished shoes, formed a theatrical ensemble that transformed everyday life into a continuous performance. Social gatherings became stages where one's wig and attire announced status, wit, and taste. Imagine the rustle of silk and the soft thud of heels on marble floors as gentlemen adjusted their curls and exchanged knowing glances, each wig a silent conversation piece. Yet, beneath the surface of this playful extravagance lay a curious paradox. These wigs, so carefully sculpted and maintained, often concealed the realities of 18th century life, the challenges of personal hygiene, health concerns, and social pressures. But it was precisely this blend of artifice and function that made the wig a lasting symbol of the era's complex relationship with appearance and identity. As the wig continued to reign supreme in style, it wasn't long before its role expanded beyond mere fashion. The next chapter in our story reveals how these grand coiffures evolved into unmistakable badges of wealth and power, marking their wearers as part of an exclusive social hierarchy. From royal courts to bustling city streets, wigs spoke louder than words, shaping perceptions and wielding influence in ways that were as subtle as they were spectacular. But it wasn't just about signaling status. Wigs swiftly became the ultimate fashion statement, a way for men to express their individuality while still adhering to the unspoken rules of elegance. Picture the 18th century gentleman, decked out in tailored frock coats, tight breeches, and polished shoes, with his face framed by a voluminous cascade of curls, often powdery white or even tinted subtle shades of blue or lavender. These wigs weren't mere accessories. They were personal masterpieces, carefully sculpted to impress and sometimes even intimidate. The art of wig making, or perruquery as it was called, blossomed into a full-blown craft. Skilled wig makers, akin to today's celebrity stylists, crafted elaborate designs that ranged from modest to outrageously ornate. Some wigs stretched so far back and were so heavily curled that they resembled small sculptures perched atop the wearer's head. Others incorporated ribbons, bows, or even tiny trinkets, transforming hair into a dynamic canvas for creativity. This wasn't just about style, it was about transformation. A man could reinvent himself with a new wig, stepping into a social persona that commanded attention. The wig became a theatrical prop in daily life, allowing wearers to present an idealized version of themselves. Civic leaders, military officers, and wealthy merchants all embraced this trend, each adopting distinctive wig styles that hinted at their profession or personality. Judges, for instance, favored tightly curled white wigs that lent an air of solemnity and respect, while flamboyant aristocrats might opt for towering powdered constructions that announced their presence before they even spoke. Interestingly, the trend didn't stop at the grown men's heads. Young boys from affluent families were often introduced to wig wearing early, marking their path toward adulthood and social integration. For them, the wig was a rite of passage, a tangible link to the complex social dance of the time. It was as if the wig whispered, "I belong here," making it easier to navigate the intricate hierarchies of courtly life. And speaking of courts, the French court of Louis XIV was a major influencer in this craze. The Sun King himself famously sported a full wig, setting a dazzling example for the aristocracy. His elaborate hairstyles weren't just for vanity. They were statements of royal presence and control, commanding the gaze of anyone fortunate or unfortunate enough to be in his orbit. This royal endorsement launched wig-wearing into a frenzy, with nobles across Europe scrambling to emulate the king's style, pushing the limits of curl and volume to new heights. But what truly cemented wigs as a cultural phenomenon was the way they blurred the line between fashion and identity. Wearing a wig could mean many things: a nod to tradition, a claim to power, or simply a desire to be seen as stylish and refined. It created a language without words, where the size, shape, color, and even scent of a e.g. communicated messages far beyond the surface. Of course, wigs demanded maintenance, which led to the rise of wig powdering salons and perfumed dustings. These rituals added a social dimension to the wig craze, turning the act of grooming into a communal affair filled with gossip and gossipers alike. Imagine the bustling wig makers' shops, filled with clouds of scented powder and the hum of careful brushing, where patrons discussed everything from politics to the latest scandals, all under the watchful eye of their magnificent coiffeurs. In many ways, the wig craze of the 18th century was the ultimate blend of art, identity, and social signaling, setting the stage for an era where appearances truly mattered. These walking works of art transformed cities into stages and men into characters in an ongoing drama of fashion and power. Yet, as dazzling as these wigs were, their story would soon intertwine with more practical concerns, revealing that behind the flare of curls and powder lay some surprisingly down-to-earth reasons for their enduring popularity. But beyond the curls and flourishes, wigs were far more than mere fashion statements. They were powerful badges that broadcasted status and rank in a society obsessed with hierarchy. Imagine stepping into the grand courts of Europe, where the size, style, and even the color of your wig could speak volumes before you uttered a single word. In these gilded halls, wigs became a kind of social language, a visual shorthand that distinguished royalty from commoners, aristocrats from merchants, and influential statesmen from everyone else. Take King Louis XIV of France, for example. The Sun King didn't just wear wigs, he practically set the wig-wearing world on fire. His famously lavish locks, powdered to an almost glowing white, became synonymous with royal grandeur and absolute power. Louis didn't just wear a wig, he used it like a royal crown, a symbol to remind everyone that his authority was unshakable. The courtiers quickly followed suit, trying to emulate the king's style to show their proximity to power and privilege. But it wasn't just about imitating the king's look. The intricacy and size of a man's wig often corresponded to his social rank. High-ranking officials and aristocrats flaunted enormous, elaborate wigs, often adorned with curls, rolls, and sometimes even ribbons or jewels. The bigger and more ornate the wig, the higher the wearer's status. Meanwhile, lower-ranked gentlemen sported simpler, more modest wigs, or sometimes just natural hair styled to resemble the trend. This visual hierarchy was so important that courts and governments even regulated wig styles and materials. In England, for instance, laws dictated who could wear certain types of wigs, ensuring that the elite kept their privileged look exclusive. Wigs made from human hair, the most prized material, were typically reserved for the upper echelons, while horsehair or less expensive fibers were common among lower ranks. Wigs also became an essential part of professional identity, especially for judges and lawyers, a tradition that survives to this day in some countries. The powdered wig became a symbol of wisdom, impartiality, and respectability, qualities essential to the rule of law. This legal uniform helped distinguish these figures in courtrooms and lent an aura of solemnity and authority to their words and decisions. In the bustling salons and coffee houses where ideas and gossip flowed freely, wearing the right wig could open doors and start conversations. It was a form of social currency, a way to navigate the complex dance of class and influence. Men meticulously maintained their wigs, investing time and money into their upkeep, knowing that a shabby or poorly styled wig could be a social misstep as damaging as a faux pas in conversation. Several entertaining anecdotes reveal just how seriously wigs were taken. For example, it was said that some noblemen would carry extra wigs in their carriages, ready to switch styles depending on the occasion or company. Others reportedly spent hours at the wig makers, ensuring their coiffures were as impressive as possible. And let's not forget the powdered part. Powdering wigs with scented starch wasn't just for show. It was a ritual that added to the overall impression of refinement, masking odors and lending a signature fragrance that announced one's presence even before speaking. What's fascinating is how this social signaling carried on even amid political upheavals and cultural shifts. Wigs weren't just about vanity. They were entwined with concepts of identity, loyalty, and power structures. Declining or rejecting the wig could mean stepping outside accepted norms or even making a political statement. In revolutionary France, for instance, abandoning the wig was a way to reject the aristocracy and the old regime, signaling alignment with new, radical ideals. So in essence, wigs acted like walking billboards of rank and privilege, encoding a complex language of power that everyone in society could read. They were the visual cues that helped maintain social order and hierarchy in an era where appearance was a crucial currency. Yet even as these wigs served as emblems of status, their story didn't end with simply looking good or showing off. Behind the pomp and circumstance were practical realities: hygiene, health, and sometimes the need to conceal what lay beneath those towering coiffures. The next chapter in the tale of 18th century wigs reveals these surprisingly sensible reasons, reminding us that fashion often dances hand in hand with function.